All
right.
This Hangout on Air is live.
All right.
So it says.
Hello.
Hello,
everyone. Let's reload over YouTube, see if it's actually showing anything.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Just because we can see it doesn't mean they can see it.
Sing.
It says.
Hello.
Oh, hello.
Here we are. Look at that.
Let's reload over YouTube, see if it's actually showing anything. Mine's not.
It doesn't mean they can see it.
There we go. Now it's live.
Oh,
Make sure to mute
Some of
yourself.
us probably need to mute some things. So we have to
mute something.
back.
I have done some muting. I think that
good.
things will
Yes.
get better shortly
That
for
is-
people who are watching this.
That is
All right. Well, good afternoon to everybody, or morning, or night, or whatever it is in your part of the world. That is the beauty of the Every Time Zone site. You can see what part of the world it is, where it is in different parts. What we're going to do today is first just talk a little bit about sort of where the Take Control acquisition came from, and then hopefully go on to answering any questions you may have. I mean, we're really happy to take any questions at all. We really will answer anything. And we will try to direct the questions appropriately. So if you want to ask one of us a question in the chat and YouTube, please do so and say, I was a question for Joe, blah, blah, blah. What would you like to know? And but as I said, to get it started, I just wanted to say this is super exciting. Tonya and I came up with this idea over kind of in the winter, over Christmas, and just sort of the general idea of, we could sell Take Control, really? That would be possible? And this has all come to forefront of our minds because Joe, Tonya, and I all turned 50 this year. And it's one of those times when you start thinking about what are you going to do? And Joe he turned 50 because he actually shares the same birthday with Tristan on January 9th. And so he's like, okay, I don't want to be doing all of these books all the time for the rest of my life. We got to do something different. Okay, Joe? And we took that and went away with it. And as we kept talking and more, we just like, there's got to be some way that we can all kind of do something new and still keep this really cool thing that is Take Control going. And so the idea came at one point when Tonya and I were driving back from the Winterlude Triathlon in Ottawa, Canada, which we enjoyed immensely, skating, skiing, and running in 14-degree weather. And I was like, we could sell it to Joe. That's a great idea. He could do all sorts of cool new stuff. He already knows what to do. He would be nice to all of our people, our authors, our editors, and our customers, which would not be likely true of any random other company we would sell to. And this would just be perfect. So we called Joe, and I think it's safe to say, Joe, you were not expecting that call.
No, so this is something that's happened many times over the years. Is I get one of these like mysterious emails or messages from Adam or Tonya, like, "Hey, Joe, we have a thing we'd like to run by you," and
and the first one of those was in 2003, I guess.
Yeah. Well, that's right. That's how this whole thing started, and almost always the thing that they want to run by me turns out to be a good thing, like an exciting thing. But it's always something unexpected. And sometimes it's like, one time, this is like a year or two ago, Adam was like, I found out about this company that's doing this like consumer research thing about automotive technology. And, I thought this would be a really appropriate thing for you to do. And, but it's in Los Angeles. So I talked to the guy, and basically, I drove up to LA. I spent a couple of hours doing this consumer research project as an expert, as a technology expert. And they paid me like, I don't know, $750 or something for basically an hour of my time. I'm like, well, that was time well spent. Anyway, when I hear one of these things from Adam and Tonya, I'm kind of expecting like something like that. Oh, it's going to be some wacky little thing, and maybe I'll make some money out of it or whatever. But I was not expecting what they actually proposed.
So we spent, this was very early February, I guess, that we did. Maybe late January. I can't quite remember the details. But we then spent the next 3 months, February, March, and much of April, all of April, really, doing all the discussions, long discussions about how we could actually make this happen. And yes, we involved the adults, we got accountants, we got lawyers, all that kind of stuff. And our lawyer was a little perturbed. She's like, I can only represent you. And we're like, no, you don't understand. We need Joe to do well. So everything in this contract has to be good for both of us. And so she came around after a while when she realized just how key it was that the entire business really succeed in the short term and the long term, for a whole lot of financial and philosophical reasons. And
in fact, the lawyer's comment was, boy, you guys are collaborative. So,
as though that's a really unusual thing. I don't see this in business.
And one of the things that's really tricky with any kind of fast-paced internet business is you can't just like go off for weeks and weeks and do some project that's not going to pay off. You just can't waste your time like that, or at least we can't. So I started to feel like, wow, like I have spent hours and hours on this, and if it doesn't work out, or like if Joe gets cold feet and decides not to do it, like, wow, that's kind of a problem because I haven't done anything else useful. So I would like call Joe up and I'd be like, we're still doing this, right?
Well, I'm having the same feelings. I'm like, well, I've spent the last couple of months doing this instead of, like my actual job of writing books. And so like, if something falls through on their end, then I'm kind of screwed. So the exact analog was happening here.
It was highly collaborative.
It really was. And what was I going to say? I had something to say about it. Oh yeah. Well, just that my lawyer said, well, it's some guy in California, it's some S corporation. Like, like, yes, but
that's true.
Like, when was the last time you've seen Joe? I'm like, well,
November.
Sure. But we talk all the time.
Yeah.
Anyway, it seems to be working out beautifully so far, and everything seems to be exactly as we'd expected. So far, we're 6 days in?
Yeah.
Well, and I think the thing that's been interesting since we announced is, and really, I guess just a few days before that, is we started some of the technical transition stuff. Because see, we had this server. It's a virtual server, but you can still think of it as a thing. And there's the tidbit side and the take control side. And the only problem is they're actually Siamese twins. That we were always very proud of this, that there was one account between the tidbit side and the take control side. So if you change your take control password, change your tidbits password. And when you logged into the take control site, it knew that you were a tidbits member and things like that. And so we had to figure out how to cleave the Siamese twins. Joe and Glenn, I luckily did not have to do too much of this, because although I know how everything is set up, I can't actually do it. I sort of know how to have other people do some of this stuff. And so Joe and Glenn mostly handle all of that.
It was an adventure. So one of the neat things, one of the helpful things is the tidbits and take control site runs, well, let's go back, prior to a week ago, ran on a virtual server, as Adam says, hosted at Linode. My own websites also run on a virtual server hosted at Linode. In fact, they're in the same data center. They run the same operating system. We both companies use EasyDNS for our domain name, registrations and services. So there were a lot of little pieces like that. That's like, we already both do things pretty much exactly the same way. And so that ought to really help with the transition. Like, all we should have to do, like, literally, we're taking a disk that's on a computer in a data center, and we're moving some data over onto a different disk on a different computer in the same data center. Like, how hard can it be? And some pieces of that include, like, the DNS transfer was stupidly, trivially easy. I was shocked at how easy it was. It was butter smooth. There was no, not the slightest glitch whatsoever. And we had been worried, we could have hours, days, weeks of downtime. No. It just happened. It was great. But the server transition, man, I studied this. I wrote up this list of, I think, here are the steps that we should probably follow to do this surgery. and I shared them with Adam and Glenn, and we studied them. We thought, okay, yeah, we made some modifications. We think, yeah, these are the steps we need to follow. And basically, there's a lot of preparatory work we needed to do to so that once the sites were separated, they would both continue to work. But what we thought was going to happen was there was going to be a moment in time where we would just turn off the website so that nothing changes while we're doing these transition things. And we basically clone the disk from their account into my account. And then we bring them both back up. Only in the new world order, the DNS points to my server for the take control stuff and continues to point to their server for the tidbit stuff. And then we do a few other little fiddly things. And that was kind of the idea that we had. And we thought, well, how,
a miracle occurs here.
Right, that's right. How long could it take? So last Saturday morning, Glenn and I started in on this. And after a couple of hours, we're like, holy cow, this transfer is going so slow. This is like sneakernet slow.
Virtual floppy disks.
Yeah, so we were like communicating back and forth with Linode support, and they offer some ideas, and we had to like both take breaks and pick it up again later that night, and we managed to get it to go faster, but still like the transfer part took 3+ hours, which is insanely long. And then we're like, okay, so the old tidbit site is back up and running again. That's great. And the new take control site is there, and it's click the run now button, and it's not running. Okay, why? And we kept encountering these things where, oh, this was not mentioned in Linode's documentation about how you move servers. For example, like, I know this is all like stupid, like little crazy technical details that 3 people in the world are going to care about, but like for this sort of a server, you need like the main disk where the operating system lives and all the files are, but you also need a scratch disk. It was never mentioned in the documentation that you have to create a scratch disk on the receiving side. And what we had done, just following the instructions, was to fill up the entire available space with the main disk. So there wasn't any space left over in our account that we could use to create a scratch disk. So we had to figure out, how do we solve this problem without starting over from scratch, so to speak. And then we we got it to the point where we could turn it on, and then everything seemed to be working except that we had no network communication. And so there was like, why do we have no network? And that's because in the process of cloning the disk, you also clone the MAC address. But the MAC address has to be unique per server. If 2 servers in the same data center say, I have the same address, one of them won't work. It just can't. So we had to figure out, how do you fix that? And then, so there was just a whole series of these things that's like, oh, we got to fix that. Oh, we got to fix that. Oh, now that's not working. And eventually, about 1:30 in the morning or something, we got it working, we thought, well enough. We did some tests, and yes, you can see books on both sites, and you can place orders, and that it seems to be good. So we were very, very tired. We kind of pat ourselves on the back and went to sleep. And then next morning, I get up, this site's still working. That's great. And middle of the morning, I forget how I found out about this, but there was there were some problems. Like like people would place orders and they would get their books, so that's great. But then our database would not record the purchases, which would cause a whole lot of other things to break. And so we kept finding these just weird little things like, oh, that, and different things wouldn't work. And Glenn and I would spend like hours hammering on this, trying to figure out where some little file was that was making something redirect to something else. And it has taken us a really long time to track down all those things. And boy, I've gotten to learn about such amazing technologies as stuff for sending email, like SPF, Sender Protection Framework, and DKIM, and all these things that like prevent your messages from getting swallowed up by other people's spam filters. And so there's like PHP stuff for a portion of the website. There's Perl stuff for another portion of the website. There's all this MySQL stuff for all the database, and like, man, so many pieces. And as Glenn freely admits, there are some wonky parts to this. I got to see where some of the bodies were buried, metaphorically speaking, and
There are skeletons in certain directories.
Yeah. Yes, there are. So
there are remnants of previous web hosts.
Yes, that is true. Some of them haven't been cleaned out yet. But like yesterday, I removed 7 gigabytes of spam messages that had at some point in the past been sent to root@tidbits.com.
Oh no.
By the way, those messages are still on your server because I was just removing on my copy of it now, because what do I need with that, right?
I was going to say, but I was saving those.
Yeah. Well, you still have them if you want them, but I don't need them and I don't want them. So
some kind of little repeating thingy that every month or so, like, cleans.
I think we could probably turn off email from that account.
So they're just like a whole long list of things like that, and we're working our way through. Like, the site's functional, it's fine, people are buying books and everything it works, but there are things like, oh man, that's using up so much disk space, or that's so slow, or that's there's 10 steps to do something that should only take 1 step. So stuff will be worked on.
Well, that's kind of one of the things that we're looking forward to in all of this, honestly, is sort of seeing what you do with it from the standpoint of, a lot of the problems that we'd had for a lot of years, that they were just things that we'd beaten our heads against a few times and just never been able to solve. And, a fresh perspective, some more technical chops, should be just interesting to see. And also a little bit of, a fresh start.
Yeah.
Sometimes when you've done something for 14 years, you feel the need to do it in the same way all the time because there's a tradition there. Like, this is the way people expect it. And so one of the big advantages that you get while still keeping the basics the same is, we're going to try something a little different. And you've got a really good excuse to do that rather than just us saying, well, it's May, we're going to do something different, and then people learn, why are you doing something different? So hopefully that will allow some sanity to go back to a few of those thoughts.
Right. I mean, there are a lot of things that I look at that I go, well, I wouldn't have done it that way. But there's, everything that exists was done that way for some reason. And even if the reason wasn't a great reason, or it was valid then but not valid now, it's still something where, you just can't rip out some part of the infrastructure and replace it and expect everything else to stay intact.
And some of these things are stupid hard. So for instance, I'll let you in on a secret. You haven't done this yet. In the production, there is a step that you take in making the PDF so that it works properly on a Kindle DX.
Wow.
Does anyone have a Kindle DX anymore? I don't know. Does it not work on any other Kindles? I don't know. I'm not even sure what the problem is anymore. It was a big deal back in 2006. I don't know. When I ran into it, figured it out, solved the problem. Just one step in the production process. Does that need to be done? I don't know.
Okay. And I either will or will not do that.
Precisely. It probably could not be done, but as I just, no telling. Because, Kindle DX is ancient devices at this point.
Well, yeah, what I'm hoping will work out really well for Joe is one of the things where Adam and I always had a little bit of tension between paying attention to the Tidbits website and all the other things that we do with Tidbits, and paying attention to Take Control. And sometimes, we made compromise. Well, we had to make compromises. And sometimes also things had to be done just in such a particular way so that they would be good for Tidbits and for Take Control. So where I think it's going to be really interesting to see what Joe can do with Take Control is just because he'll be able to just really focus on just that one thing. And I think that's going to help Take Control. Also, I think it's going to help Tidbits because, when Adam gets up in the morning now, he's usually more like thinking about under the hood stuff with the websites. When he gets up in the morning, he can just think about something that has to do with Tidbits. And when Joe gets up in the morning, he he used to do a wider variety of projects than he will be doing, or he can focus more tightly on Take Control. And I think that's going to be sort of a relief for everything. I think 6 months from now or a year from now, we'll come back here and we'll be like, oh, this was so great because we were able to get all this stuff done because our brains could focus on a narrower set of details.
Well, for me, definitely Tibbetts infrastructure is a big one. The other thing that we've been actually doing for a little while now, and again, you don't see this as much because it's been more me doing it, but the Tibbetts Content Network, which is providing syndicated content to Apple consultants and resellers and whatnot, has been kind of a whole lot of fun as a business to start up. And it's a small business at the moment, but growing. And so that's another place where I'm going to be focusing attention, is just figuring out the best ways to make that into a new stream of income for us. But why don't we know what Joe's going to be doing when he gets up in the morning time, but what are you going to be doing?
Oh, me? Well, Tuesday was kind of a letdown. So Monday was very exciting because we announced the big transition. We got a lot of email from people, and I'd been looking forward to it for so long. And I figured once it was announced, it was definitely definitely happening, So it was a really great day. I was really happy. And then what happened on Tuesday? I got up and I didn't even get out of my pajamas until 3 in the afternoon. What I did was I basically edited this manuscript that we've been working on for a long time because we really want to publish the book very soon. And, it just needed a lot of attention. Plus there were a couple other things that had to get taken care of right away. So basically I had been looking forward to kind of a lighter schedule with fewer details. But in fact, that did not occur at all. In fact, it was probably one of my bad work day or a hard work day. Because I normally get out of my pajamas before lunch. I'm not even sure when I had lunch on Tuesday. It was one of those days. And I thought, wow, what's going on here? Nothing has changed. But then basically what's going on is just that I am very firmly committed and very motivated to help out at Take Control with the books that were already in progress before we started this. And Joe and I have talked through what those books are and what I'm going to do. And, I'm excited about it and I'm definitely doing it. And I'm actually having a lot of fun with the book that we're working on right now. I'm working with Shelley Sawyer, a book on calendar and reminders. And we're diving really deep into some of the things what happens if you share a calendar and then there's an event in the calendar and you change the alerts that go with the event? Do those changed alerts stay just with you locally, or do they spread out to everybody else? And so some of that really pesky, fussy stuff also with travel time. Anyway, so my brain is so far into calendars, I can hardly remember to come out of it to drink, which is
you could set a reminder for that.
But I've sort of lived like this for the last 14 years. And one of the goals here was just, it's a good way to live, but it's time to live a different way. So I think in a few more weeks that I will not get up in the morning and immediately dive into some Take Control topic. I'm not actually sure what that will look like. In the past 14 years, there has been 10 days, no kidding, maybe not even 10 days, when there wasn't a manuscript that was waiting for me to edit it. And sometimes I would take the day off, I'd be I'm not going to edit a manuscript today. But the fact is, it was there. And for a long time, that was awesome. It was good. I got to have this really interesting work. I got to learn all this stuff. But so I think it's going to be quite odd when I run out of manuscripts.
Which will be pretty soon.
Yeah, pretty soon. And Joe is going to pick up some of that, but I think Joe's also going to spread it out more. So there'll be more people. But that's him, whatever he does is cool.
Well, we've had this inside joke since day one, it's called Take Control because Adam and Tonya are control freaks. And we have an internal mailing list called Control Freaks. And one of the first things Adam sent around was this Calvin and Hobbes comic, Dad, what's a control freak? and I don't even remember the punchline anymore. But it was like it's even,
I think it's like someone who cares about doing things the right way.
yeah. So, you know, like that's great in many respects. I think I have less of those tendencies.
They're healthy for you.
Right. I think I think I feel, you know, a notch or two more able to either delegate something or just say, you know, it's not worth my stress to care about that detail. And so there are, so, you know, I'm still learning many things, and I'm not sure where, you know, who is going to be responsible for every task, and which of those things, like the Kindle DX, I'm just going to decide I'm going to let that go. Like, I don't know. But there will be some things that I just decide I'm going to let that go in the interest of like having a healthy mind and body. You know, there's just like, there are limits. I've been burning the midnight oil every day this week, and just like for months, literally, this has been the only thing on my mind. I've been doing take control stuff. A lot of things that either the general public will never see, or they will only see sort of distantly and vaguely. Like, you know, nobody who comes to our site is going to care about like details of server configuration. That's meaningless. It's just like, is this a book I want? Can I buy it? Like, that's all there is for the public. But there are a lot of things that make the system work better or worse for me, for the other authors, of which, by the way, there are quite a few, for the editors, for you know, people buying books and maintaining their accounts and so forth. And the steps in I mean, there are so many steps to make an ebook. I think a lot of people just have this idea that, well, you get in a word processor and you type and you print to PDF and kind of you're magically done. But it's 1,000 times more complicated than that. And so all of the steps that we go through to make these books not just exist but be really great, they're important to me. They're important to our customers. But there are also some parts of this that are, you know, that literally nobody's going to care about. So Adam was holding up one of these babies.
Yeah.
One of these here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Bookmarked, I see.
Eric Beavers was just saying one of his favorite tech book ever was The Nicest Way.
Oh,
great book.
Well, this was, you know, this was my first real book. Like, I mean,
we've actually talked about doing a Take Control of Nicest Writer Pro, but the
my goodness,
hasn't quite aligned for that yet.
So this
look what was inside the cover of mine.
Oh wow! Back when it was just a pamphlet.
Yeah, the pamphlets, the programming dialect, and the quick reference.
So my mom, some of you have seen this before, like in other Hangouts or parties or things. In 1971, when I was 4 years old, I wrote this book, and it's apparently, let's see, I mean, it's a picture book, okay? Apparently, I was supposed. There's like, it's a fire and explosions, and this is a ladder, like a fire truck ladder. And then in 1974, I got really advanced, and I wrote Arnold and Sam, the Two Dragons, except if you go inside the title page says Sam and Arnold, the Two Dragons, so I don't actually know which one is canonical.
That's why you need an editor.
Yeah, well, you know, I didn't have an editor, but I did have a typist. My mom typed this up for me. And this actually went in the school library of my elementary school.
Wow.
And it was checked out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 times over a period of, I don't know, 6 or 7 years. And I think only maybe 2 of those were me. So, but other than those, this was my first real book, and this came out, it's copyright 1996, but it really came out at the very end of 1995. And I mean, look at that, 600 pages of technical goodness.
About Nisus.
Nisus.
As Michael was commenting, this is obviously Nisus, you know, much older version, I was 3. 4. I can't remember what the version numbers were at that point. And Nisus had trouble when OS 10 came out, and sort of disappeared for quite a while. And then they came out with Nisus Writer Express, which was kind of a low-end version, didn't really have all the great technical goodness that the Nisus Writer had. And then finally, Nisus Writer Pro shipped, and life became good again for those of us who really, really appreciate our word processors. And now, thanks to Nisus Writer and a huge number of macros, but I will say that the core of Nisus Writer is really what's important. You know, it has the change tracking we need. It has the commenting we need. It has all the styles and exporting and importing. And then the macros has made it the linchpin of the entire Take Control publishing system.
Yeah, I hope that Take Control. That Nisus, stays in business, keeps selling and updating this software, because it is unique. We started out using Word to make our books, and then after, I know we all felt that way. It's like we started out using app that must not be named, and then like after a certain number of years, we switched to Pages. But then, yeah, so Tonya's the
reason why we use Word.
I thought since we're doing show and tell, I was going to share the first book that I ever wrote, which is part of why we were able to use Word to good advantage, which was I really knew that sucker inside and out. But it just didn't have the ability to make an EPUB. And when the iPad came out, all of a sudden it was like, what? Well, actually, I'm not sure it was the iPad. It was was iBooks the app immediately?
It was the iPad, but basically, in fact,
had to make EPUBs. It was just like overnight, everyone was like, how could you not make EPUBs? And we're like, it's really hard to get an EPUB out of Microsoft Word. So that was our odyssey began to find a better system.
In fact, it was actually hard to get a PDF out of Microsoft Word.
Oh, we had that one down.
It's hard to get productivity out of Microsoft Word.
Well,
I mean,
a lot of people don't remember is that we actually had to produce our PDFs in Word for Windows.
Oh yeah.
That's true.
The Mac version of Word could not produce a PDF with bookmarks and all that good stuff. So then we switched to Pages, which could do a good PDF with bookmarks and all that, and it could do an EPUB, but it wasn't a very good EPUB.
Right.
Well, we worked on it, right? We were using BB Edit, and we had these text factories, and we were starting to be like trying to figure out how to make a CSS sheet that really worked for us. But it was like every time we produced a book, we would look at it and we'd say, oh, we'd pick the ugliest thing and we'd like tackle that and try to make it better. Each time we just like knock one more thing off if we had time. But it was a slow process, and Pages itself never endeared itself to us. I wouldn't say that Word had endeared itself to us, but nobody
loved Pages.
Screamed too much about the idea of trying yet another word processor when we switched.
I mean, there were these EPUB related reasons that we left Pages, but as I recall the timeline, and I might have this screwed up, I think it was shortly after that Apple updated Pages in such a way that it would no longer actually create bookmarks, which would have
broke it for us. I mean, on us.
Yeah. So Pages, I think it was 5 or whatever. There was one version that Apple came out with, the big new version that was more similar on the iPad, and it lost a huge number of features. That was after we had switched.
Yeah, but it was like 2 weeks after we switched or something.
It was not a long time after. The thing that actually saved us, and what was kind of an interesting, again, sort of an interesting technical thing that no one sees, but everyone suddenly was able to benefit from better EPUBs and actually much better Mobis for Kindle users, was that Nisus can't itself produce an EPUB or a Mobi.
Well, it can.
No, it can, but not a great one.
Yeah.
Yeah, not a good one. But what it can do, and this is where Joe's macros came back and gave us just amazing capability, was we found this service called LeanPub, which you can feed a markdown file, and it will produce a really good EPUB and a good Mobi, and you get to provide all the CSS and everything, so it looks exactly the way you want it. And so basically, in the Word world, we had a bad PDF and no EPUB.
Oh wait, we had a perfectly fine PDF. We just had to tweak it.
Well, yeah, we had to work at it. We had bad PDF production.
Yes.
Because we had good PDF production, but bad EPUB production, but at least it existed. And actually, we had Mobies then too, but what most people don't realize is they were converted for us by O'Reilly in India. I still don't know how they did that.
But they were converted from the PDF, right?
I think they were converted from the well, I don't know.
Let's not even go there.
It was a process, yeah.
So then with Nisus, we got a good PDF production process, and then with LeanPub, we got a good EPUB and Mobi production process. So the whole thing got a whole lot better. And it was honestly also a lot of fun to put together. You sort of feel like you're assembling these pieces. It's sort of like Tetris, and all of a sudden it falls together. You're like, yes, I did it! It all works. Look at that! Look at that! And then it's all fun until someone changes something, and you're like, why is it breaking?
Well, the casual person might ask a question like, since you're starting with Markdown and using that to create your EPUB and your Mobi, why can't your PDF also be created from Markdown? Because like Markdown's easy and it's fun and you can use any text editor, and that's true. And in fact, LeanPub does create PDFs. But the thing about it is we want our PDFs to actually be beautiful and useful. And so things that we care about are like page breaks. Like we don't want to have, just because, a graphic happened to be 2 pixels too tall, it skipped down to the next page, and now you have like 2 lines on a page and then all this blank space and then the next page. Or like a sidebar splits across pages because it was slightly too long or something like that. So if you're just writing in Markdown and you feed that into an engine, the engine has no way to know that stuff, has no way to know your intention. And you as a writer or editor or publisher can't know a priori how all these bits are going to be laid out at the end. So you could, write in Markdown, produce a PDF, like, oh, we got some bad page breaks, so we got to go back and edit a lot of stuff, run it through the engine again, see where things end up, run it through again. And there might be, I could at least conceive of a situation in which a PDF creating algorithm was smart enough to deal with all that stuff the way we as human beings would, but it would have to be really, really smart. And so I'm skeptical. I'm skeptical of that. So if we want PDFs to look and work the way that's going to be best for our readers, we have to basically write in a WYSIWYG mode. Well, it's not so much that we write in a WYSIWYG mode, but the key thing is that between the end of the writing and the beginning of the production, we have to know what the pages are actually going to look like. And so we do a lot of fiddling with things like, the size of graphics and where things are positioned, like, oh, we should maybe move this note from here to down here because that will make the layout better. And, page breaks and things like that. So when we're designing we basically write as though we were, trying to create that final PDF in Nisus Writer, because it's not that we just print a PDF and we're done by any means, but we are creating the layout there, so we know where things are going to be. And then we have to reverse engineer the Markdown out of that. We take this beautiful, completed, styled up, finished document, and then I had to create this huge macro to distill all of that down to Markdown that we can actually use to create the other version. So it's an odd process, admittedly, but it actually works really well.
Well, I think, people, publishing professionals sometimes talk about these systems that they've got. And there is always this tension in publishing between automation and, as Joe said, perfection. In essence, you want it to look perfect. And in publishing, there's a great tradition of tweaking things in the tiniest ways to make sure it looks perfect. Tonya spends, Tanya, an hour or two at least on every book, like setting page breaks and line endings and things like that.
A little more, like maybe 3 hours.
Yeah. So, but it's just like to make the PDF look beautiful. And so, so I think that I'm actually really happy with the way we ended up with this, because in EPUB and Mobi, you can't do that. There are certain things you have some control over, and we've tweaked on all those. So there's, you get space after graphics and, space between, before and after sidebars, all that. But you can't really focus because anyone can change their screen size. They can change the font size. It just reflows. But in the PDF, it's just nice when it looks really good. And we all have these big, gorgeous screens now. So you can actually have a PDF that you can look at and, on a single page. But anyway.
Another thing about the PDF, I don't know this, but I sort of have this guess that Joe might be considering or have the know-how to get our books printable on paper. And you definitely need a good-looking PDF if you're going to contemplate that.
So let's talk about printing books for a minute. I'm going to get another visual aid here. These my Joe on Tech books. Here's one of them. Speeding up your
mouse. I know you had the Joe on Tech book.
It's on paper. It's also a PDF and EPUB and Mobi. So long ago, we Take Control partnered with a company called Coop, which that's QOOP. It doesn't exist anymore. It was started by my.
Adam should have one of those.
Sorry.
Adam, you probably one of those in your office.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
It was started. So Coop was started by a guy named Bill Murray, who used to be the president of Kensington, where I used to work.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about that.
Yeah. So not that Bill Murray, but the other Bill Murray. Although I did when I was in college, I had a summer job delivering groceries. And I got to deliver groceries to the other Bill Murray's house. So that's my little brush. Okay. So what Coop did, or maybe it was pronounced Coop, I don't remember. Anyway, this company, it was a print-on-demand place. So we would basically send them PDFs, and they would print them onto paper, and they would like spiral bind them, and then send them out to people. It was great. And all we had, we didn't really have to do anything special except send them a copy. Exaggerating a little bit, but basically we just had to send them a copy.
It was a little special, but yeah.
Yeah. But then they went out of business. So it was like, well, we could find another company that would do this, but there are a lot of them, and it would make us jump through a lot of hoops, and it would be work and expensive, and not that many of our customers are actually buying these anyway, so we just didn't. Then in the intervening years, a lot of people asked me for printed versions of the books. And I'm like, if I would, I could. And then when the opportunity came to do these Joe on Tech books, I'm like, oh, I can, so I will. So I figured out a process to get that third. So it's not just the PDF and not just the electronic version, but like this third form of the book. So this is it's not just a simple matter of you take the PDF and you send it to, in this case, I'm using CreateSpace for the print on demand. It's not that simple because, first of all, this is a different size.
The page breaks are in different places.
So you got to worry about page breaks. I want to have like my page numbers on the outside corners. I want to make sure that like the intro and chapter 1 start on the right-hand page. That's where the odd numbers go, on the right-hand side, in a regular book.
If you're not a book geek, you don't really realize that there are all these like pretty small little thingies that bookmakers do to create this document that will work well for the reader, like the placement of the page numbers or how the chapters start. Those are things book designers really do think about. But
like a really big deal, our books are full of URLs and cross-references. So if you've got an ebook, then you just have a link like click here, great, and you go where you go. In a printed book, number one, if you want to refer to another spot within the book, you can't just say see chapter 12, because now somebody's got to like go look up chapter 12, go look up that heading. It's a real pain. If you want to say see chapter 12, which starts on page 83, then you gotta put in that page number, but you don't want to have page 83 in the ebook version, right? Because like with an EPUB, it's going to be, we have no idea what page it's going to end up. It all depends on the font size somebody chooses. And then for external URLs, well, it's one thing if you're going to apple.com, that's short, that's easy. But sometimes the URLs you got to send people to are like a mile long. You're not going to print that in a book and expect people to type, 3 lines worth of a URL to get to what's going.
Yes.
Yeah. So I had to solve those problems for my printed books, and I came up with what I thought was a very clever system to do that for these 4 books that I published that way. And I was really quite pleased with the solutions I came up with. On the other hand, my solutions, although they work great for 4 books, don't scale to the entire Take Control library. So if we were to have printed books in the rest of the Take Control line, I would have to devise a different strategy, because it's just like this. It's okay for things that I am doing just myself, and I don't mind doing certain manual things and so forth. But when we're talking about lots of authors and lots of editors and lots of titles, it gets weird. So I'm going to investigate that. I would like to be able to do it. This past week, a couple of people have said, Joe, it sure would be great to have, printed Take Control books again. I'm like, I hear you. It's a lot more complicated than you might think. I'm going to look into it. We'll see what we can come up with. It's this problem that I solved, so I feel like I can solve it again, but it's a different problem to solve in the Take Control world than it is to solve in the, your own little publisher world. So yeah, and gutters, Michael says. Yes, gutters too.
Gutters.
Well, it is, I think it is interesting just how much, well, perhaps I'll phrase it as a question. How much do you think what you're doing, people will see a difference? Because obviously not the next book or something like that. It's not gonna be, but when do you think someone will say, wow, I can see where Joe has started to take control?
Take over.
Yeah.
Oh, well, that's a little bit hard to answer, because I think a lot of the changes are going to be very gradual. It's not like I'm going to say, it's not like things are going to chug along for a month or two, and then one day I'm just going to take off the wraps and go, it's Take Control 3.0. It's like, it's not going to be like that. I think the changes that occur might be so gradual that if people aren't paying attention, maybe people will like go away. They won't have seen the site or the books for a while, and they come back after 6 months and they're like, oh, wow, that's different. So I think some things that people will notice, if and when we get to the point of being able to offer print books, that will be a noticeable thing. I don't. So I'm gonna reassure people that future Take Control books will not have a cartoon image of me on the cover. It was a fun little thing to try. Okay, we're not going to put cartoon me on the covers of Take Control books, but I can imagine that we will play with the cover design. This is now we're on our 3rd major cover design now, and it's been nice. I think we could consider refreshing that at some point in the future. So that'll be a visible thing that people notice.
How about titles or genres beyond the usual?
Well, yeah. So I was getting to that. Yeah. When back in 2003, I mean, it's so long ago. It's like, internet years are like dog years. They're worth 7 in the real world, and so it feels like that's such a lifetime ago. 2003, the things we didn't know back then. I mean, years before the iPhone existed, years before the iPad existed. It's just like, it's weird. So we're starting to Take Control books, and like ebooks weren't really a thing then. It wasn't like people were going to Amazon and buying ebooks all the time. It was just, it wasn't like that. So we had to be kind of trendsetters and trailblazers and all those things in a way. back then when we started Take Control Books, there was this group of authors that kind of wrote the first several books, and it grew from there. And we were all people, we knew each other, and we had all written sort of conventional, dead tree books before. And Adam was like, hey, we ought to write ebooks, and we're going to start with Mac related topics because we all know the Mac and we've written books about the Mac, and Tidbits readers are interested in the Mac. But hey, this could go anywhere. We could write about anything. And one person was like, I want to write about 18th century Italian opera. And another person was like, I want to write about bicycle maintenance. And another person was like, I want to write about cooking. And so we're all thinking, yeah, sure, like whatever. We're going to start with what we know, and we're gonna add on from there. And as things turned out, whenever we would do books that were sort of outside, it's not just that we're writing books about not Apple specific things, but books about topics that Apple users wouldn't likely care about. We didn't sell very many. Like I wrote this really excellent book about Thanksgiving dinner, and everybody who has read it loves it, and I'm very proud of it. It was a wonderful experience, but hardly anybody bought it. Yeah, there it is.
Talk so that you're and bring the book back up and talk so it looks big.
Yeah, so this is the print on demand version of Take Control Thanksgiving Dinner, which also comes with files you can actually print. Move my image there. Files you can print because, of course, you need to work from something in the kitchen. And this is even before an iPad, when you could conceivably have worked from a digital file in the kitchen.
Yeah, so Adam and Tonya usually have like 2 iPads in their kitchen with, showing different parts of this book. So anyway, but it's not just that. Like there were even other tech topics that we did, like, buying a digital TV or...
Well, if buying a digital TV was popular, the problem is we could not keep it updated.
Right.
It was impossible.
But like, I don't even remember, like, I don't know remember how all the different topics sold, but I know that a lot of them just didn't last very long, like buying a cheap plane ticket. I thought that was a great topic for a book.
Off topic, but.
Yeah. So there basically my feeling was that the farther we strayed away from what the kind of core Tidbits reader was interested in, the less likely we were to be able to sell a lot of books. So there have been, I've written a lot of books that are platform neutral. They're still about tech, but like, my online privacy book, my passwords book, my Dropbox book, these are equally good if you use Windows or Android or whatever. So they're not really Mac or Apple specific, but because they appeal to people who are Apple users, they're useful and interesting to them, we sell them in good quantities. So the nut that we've had to crack, though, is if we want to write books about a broader set of topics, because there are lots of things that we're all interested in, how do we expand our audience to reach people who are not already Take Control customers or not already sort of in our sphere of influence? And this has been the topic of many hours of discussion here in the Take Control, galactic headquarters in San Diego. So my wife, Morgan Yonke, who is now going to be in charge of publicity and marketing for us, because that's her professional background, is going to be looking into this topic rather deeply. So, Adam and Tonya tried some things like Google Ads and found them not to be terribly effective. One of the challenges, like a lot of people kind of imagine online advertising as being like, well, I see these ads everywhere, so they must, be really great. But what you don't see is that it might cost you, $10 worth of ad purchases to acquire one customer. And if the thing you're selling costs $10, well, then you haven't really made money on that, So it is more challenging than you might think to expand your audience to to find new groups of customers. Like, we write a book about programming. That's cool. Lots of people are into programming, right? Not so many among our existing Take Control users. Certainly millions of people out there would like such a book, and now we have to find what is a way to reach them that we can actually afford, and that isn't going to cost us more than we end up making in book sales. And we have lots of ideas. There are things that we're going to try, and some of them will fail, and that's okay. We're going to experiment. We're going to try things. I would love to think that in a couple of years, we still are going to be doing books about Apple stuff and tech topics.
Apple is so over. I mean, you just take one look at that company and you can tell they are not even going to be around in a couple of years, because they're struggling, right? I mean, they cannot come up with anything to do. I
mean, they can barely make $1 billion a day. So like, so I would be very surprised indeed if ever, as long as I or Take Control Books is in existence, that we ever stopped doing books about Apple topics. But I think we're going to sort of expand, within the tech world. We've sort of done a corner of it, and I think.
Joe seems to have frozen.
Oh my God! I can see Joe, but I can't hear him. He froze.
This happens. So one never knows with streaming technology, but. I guess what I can say is that we really tried hard with some of these other topics to do it, but you really have to think differently think out of the box when you're trying to go to a different topic. And right. And we've taken some swipes at it, but a little bit of the problem was, I think, you can sort of tell Tonya really is the editor-in-chief. Every book, 50,000 pages of Take Control stuff has gone through Tanya's head.
That's our estimate. I was like, how
not much an estimate. That's pretty good. That's pretty accurate.
1 million. So it was actually pretty disappointing to find that it was only 50,000. For
me, I was doing a lot of the server stuff, a lot of the infrastructure stuff, production stuff, a little more technical things. And I was also, Tonya would usually draft initial marketing stuff, basically, she knew it was in the book, and then I would go in and, as we call it, ladder it up, because I was not so deep in the book that I could step back and say, oh, what's interesting about this is, and
yeah, he'd make it better and he'd add jokes, because Adam is really good at adding jokes. And then I would look at it and be like, well, that's pretty good, but you missed the point here, you missed the point there. Make it better. More jokes, make it better. We keep going back and forth until we were exhausted or we were satisfied.
But I was just going to say is that, so one of the things that we're looking forward to seeing how Take Control evolves in the future is Joe has more technical skills than I do, and Morgan has way more marketing experience and skills, hopefully, than we do, in terms of, again, going outside the blinders that we have of being in the Apple world for 27 years. So it could be some really interesting things that can happen there.
And then like 3 different devices ding at the same time. Like, so I think one of the things we're going to do differently is, okay, so when I have written my like Dead Tree books, even if a publisher comes to me and says, Joe, would you like to write a book about such and such? And I say, yeah, okay, I'll write that book. Before we actually sign a contract, they come back to me and they say, okay, this book that we just asked you to do, you have to convince us to do it. And so they will make me fill out a form that describes the book. It's sort of like writing the the back cover copy, what you would see on a paper book if you picked it up in a bookstore. But they want me to describe the audience. They want me to say how many people are in the audience and how those people could be reached. They want me to tell them what the competitive titles are. Who is this, what is this book up against? They want me to say where it will be sold. They want me to describe the stereotypical purchaser, demographics on that person, and all this kind of marketing stuff. They want to validate that there is a believable, actionable marketing plan for this book before they actually give it the green light to publish it. And every time I've had to do one of those things, I've really, really hated it. Because it's tedious, it's hard, and it's kind of, not my area. Like, I'm into writing the tech stuff. I'm not really into doing market research. But in retrospect, I always appreciate having had that stuff done up front. And so I think we're going to be following a process more like that in the future with Take Control, which is that before we officially give a new book a green light,
4 o'clock.
In consultation with the author and possibly the editor and Morgan and me, we very carefully think through all the marketing stuff. So who is going to buy this book? What is our pitch to them to buy it? Remember, it hasn't been written yet. And how do we get to those people? And if we have what we feel is a really solid story to be able to do that, then even if it's on a completely new topic, not even in the tech sphere, then we might go for it. If we have a topic that is solidly in the tech sphere, even solidly in the Apple sphere, and we like it, but we can't come up with the marketing pitch that convinces us that, yes, we're going to sell, thousands of copies of this book, we're going to say no, or not now, or something like that. So it is, just there's no way to minimize. This is a big thing. It's not easy to solve. It's a hard nut to crack. I'm treating this as a challenge. Like, I should be able to figure this out because I'm smart, right? So I'm not treating it as oh no, how are we going to do this? I'm like, oh, this would be fun. We got to figure out how to do this. And I'm hoping that the areas that we eventually expand into overlap enough with what we've done so far that we're not just saying, hey, new person, we have one book for you. It's going to be, hey, new person, we have this book that we especially think you're going to be interested in, but also this other thing. And these other things, because really, I think that like tons of people in the world really would love to know more about dealing with passwords and online privacy and backups and you name it. Tons of people would, but we need to get our foot in the door somehow. And if our foot in the door is like, an article about my book on your digital legacy in AARP magazine, which I don't know, could happen. That would be neat. Then we have an opportunity to say, oh, and if you're interested in this, you might also be interested in these other things. So I think there's a lot of things kind of like that we're looking to do.
Well, I think our hour is pretty much up. And if anyone has any last minute questions, get them in now. But it sure has been fun to get to talk about this yet again, and hopefully give a little bit more color into where it came from and where it's going. And of course, the color is purple. What is the Pantone color?
It's so. Which, by the way, I will just, sorry to get off the purpling, but if anyone has things they would like to say or like to know about that they did not feel like they wanted to ask publicly, anyone who has ever encountered a search engine should be able to discover how to contact me by email. If you can't figure out how to contact me by email, I would really wonder whether you should be using technology at all. So it's pretty easy to do, and I answer my emails, so I'd be very happy to chat with you that way too.
And I just want to say thanks to everyone who's watching, and hope you have a lovely Saturday, rest of your Saturday.
What she said.
All right. Well, thank you all. And we'll be posting the URL for this for posterity. So hopefully people can watch it if they weren't able to make this particular time. Until then, goodbye.
Bye.